The sun beat down on Silas Blackwood's ranch like a blacksmith's hammer on hot iron, forging the parched earth into a cracked and unforgiving landscape. He was a man carved from the same harsh material, solitary, his words few, his eyes holding the ghosts of a war and a loss that had driven him to this desolate edge of the world. He was mending a fence line, the wire biting into his calloused hands, when he saw it. A bundle of rags, small and still, lying near a cluster of sun-scorched rocks. Coyotes would find it by nightfall. He approached, wary. His hand instinctively rested on the butt of the Colt Peacemaker holstered low on his hip. It wasn't an animal. With the toe of his worn boot, he nudged the rags. A low moan, barely a breath. He knelt. Beneath a tattered, filth-encrusted hood, a pair of eyes, wide with a terror that went beyond fear, stared up at him. A girl. No more than 16, if that. Her face was a mask of dirt and dried blood, lips cracked, skin stretched taut over sharp cheekbones. He saw the raw, chafed marks on her wrists. Someone had left her here to die. The cruelty of it settled in his gut like a cold stone. He said nothing, simply scooped her up. She weighed almost nothing. The journey back to his small, fortified cabin was made in silence, broken only by her occasional shuddering gasps. He laid her on his own cot, the only soft place in the rugged dwelling. With a gentleness that would have surprised anyone who knew his reputation, he began to clean her face with a damp cloth. The grime came away in streaks, revealing pale skin, bruised and tender. As he wiped away the filth clinging to her hair, the ragged hood fell completely away. Her hair, matted and dull, framed a face of startling, fragile youth. The sight of her, so broken and vulnerable, twisted something in Silas's chest, something he thought long dead. Her eyes fluttered open again, focusing on him with an animalistic fear. She tried to recoil, but her weak limbs wouldn't obey. "Easy," Silas rumbled, his voice rough from disuse. "You're safe here," but the word safe seemed to make the terror in her eyes flare brighter, a horrifying contradiction that made his blood run cold. What had this child endured? He didn't press her. For days, she remained mostly silent, a phantom in his small cabin. He'd leave food and water by the cot, and it would be gone when he returned from his work. He saw her flinch from his shadow, her breath catching if he moved too quickly. The silence in the cabin was thick, a living thing, punctuated only by the howl of the prairie wind and the girl's infrequent, whispered nightmares. Slowly, tentatively, she began to watch him. He'd catch her gaze, dark and haunted, before she'd quickly look away. He spoke little, just necessities, but his movements were calm, deliberate. He was a man used to waiting, whether for rain, or for a threat to pass, or for a broken thing to mend. One evening, as a sliver of moon hung in the inky sky, she spoke. Her voice was a dry whisper, like leaves skittering across hard ground. "He'll come for me." Silas stopped cleaning his rifle, the metallic click loud in the sudden stillness. He turned, his face unreadable in the dim lamplight. "Who?" She hugged herself, her small frame trembling. Malachi, the name was exhaled, a wisp of pure dread. "My father." Silas felt a muscle twitch in his jaw. "A father who left his daughter for dead in the desert." "He wants me back," she continued, her voice gaining a desperate edge. "He always gets what he wants. He has men, many men." Her eyes, wide and luminous in the gloom, pleaded with him. "They won't stop." The air grew heavy. Silas looked out the small, grimy window into the vast, dark emptiness that surrounded them. He knew this land, its dangers, its deceptions. But this was a new kind of threat, one with a human face, a father's face. The stakes, already high, had just been brutally raised. He thought of his own long-lost child, a phantom pain that never truly faded. He looked back at the girl, Elara, as he'd come to call her in his mind, for she had not offered her name. "Let them come," he said, his voice a low growl. It was not a boast, but a grim promise. And as if summoned by her words, the next morning, Silas saw them. 3 riders, specks of dust on the distant horizon, growing steadily larger. They were coming. The riders were hard men, their faces grim, their eyes cold and assessing as they reined in before Silas's cabin. One, a burly man with a scar that split his eyebrow, was clearly the leader. "We're looking for a girl," he announced, his voice like gravel. "Runaway." Property of Malachi Thorne. Silas leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. His shotgun was just inside, propped and ready. "Don't know any Malachi Thorne." "Or any girl?" The scar-faced man's eyes narrowed. "Don't play games, old man. We know she came this way. Thorne wants her back. Unharmed, if possible. Makes it easier for everyone." His hand drifted towards the Colt at his hip. A silent threat. "She your daughter?" Silas asked, his voice deceptively mild. "Not yours to ask," another rider snarled. Silas ignored him, his gaze fixed on the leader. A man who'd call his own kin property till he let the sentence hang. Tension coiled in the air, tight and dangerous. The leader's patience snapped. "Enough talk. We're talking to her." He spurred his horse forward. Silas moved with a speed that belied his weathered frame. He dove sideways, back into the cabin, snatching up the shotgun. A bullet splintered the wood where his head had been. He fired both barrels, not at the men, but at the ground before their horses. The animals screamed, rearing in panic. One rider was thrown. Silas used the chaos, firing his peacemaker, each shot precise, kicking up dust near their feet, driving them back. He wasn't aiming to kill, not yet. He was sending a message. The men, unnerved by his ferocity and skill, regrouped hastily, dragging their fallen comrade. The leader glared at Silas, his face contorted with fury. "Thorne will hear of this. He'll come himself. You'll regret this day, old man. You'll regret it to your grave." They galloped away, leaving a cloud of dust and curses. Silas watched them go, his breath coming hard. He reloaded, his movements economical. The immediate threat was gone, but he knew this was only the beginning. He turned to find Ilara standing in the shadows, her eyes wide, not with fear this time, but with a dawning, fragile hope. That night, she told him more. The words tumbled out, hesitant at first, then with a desperate rush. "He's not just cruel," she whispered, her face pale in the flickering candlelight. "It's more than that." She took a shuddering breath. "Malachi, he leads them. The faithful. They believe he speaks for God. That his chosen." Her voice dropped lower, filled with a horror that chilled Silas to the bone. They were preparing for a consecration. A ritual. I was to be the offering. The words hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't just a brutal father. This was organized evil, a darkness cloaked in righteousness. A cult. And Ilara was not just a runaway, she was an escapee from a fate worse than he could have imagined. The true, deeper evil was now laid bare, and it was far more monstrous than he had suspected. Everything was about to get much worse. The revelation of Malachi's true nature hung in the air of the small cabin, a suffocating presence. Ilara described the flock of the new dawn, their isolated compound hidden deep in the canyons, their absolute devotion to Malachi, who preached of a coming cleansing fire from which only his followers would be spared. She spoke of strange ceremonies, of a chilling fervor in their eyes, and of the purification she was destined for, a sacrifice to ensure their leader's power and the group's salvation. Her escape had been a desperate, improbable flight, driven by a primal will to live. Silas listened, his face a granite mask, but inside, a cold fury burned. He'd seen evil in war, the senseless brutality of men. But this was a calculated, insidious corruption, preying on the weak, twisting faith into a weapon. He now understood the depth of the girl's terror. The reason safe was a foreign concept to her. The dust on the horizon appeared 2 days later, a far larger cloud than before, announcing an army, not just a posse. Malachi Thorne had come himself. They watched from the cabin window as a dozen riders, maybe more, fanned out, surrounding the small ranch. At their head rode a man on a magnificent black stallion. Even from a distance, Malachi exuded an aura of command, his posture regal, his movements deliberate. He rode forward alone, stopping 100 yards from the cabin. His voice, when he called out, was not the harsh bark of his henchman, but smooth, resonant, almost sorrowful. "Silas Blackwood! I have come for my daughter, Ilara. She is misguided, lost. I wish only to bring her back to the fold, where she will be safe and loved." As Silas stepped out, shotgun held loosely at his side. "She's not your property, Thorn. And she's not lost. She's free." Malachi's face, handsome and framed by silvering hair, registered a patient sadness. "You misunderstand, old man. You are harboring a child of prophecy, one crucial to the dawn that is coming. You are interfering with divine will." His voice hardened slightly. "Give her to me, and you may yet live to see that dawn. Refuse, and you will burn with the rest of the unrighteous." Condescending, threatening, cloaked in the language of salvation. "She stays with me," Silas stated, his voice flat, final. Malachi's smile was chilling. "So be it." He raised a hand, and his men slowly began to close the circle. The siege had begun. The isolation of the ranch, once Silas's solace, now felt like a trap. Days blurred into a tense waiting game, punctuated by sporadic gunfire, attempts to test their defenses. Silas, using every ounce of his survival knowledge, conserved ammunition, fortified the cabin further. Ilara, surprisingly, proved resourceful, her small hands quick to reload, her eyes sharp for movement. She was terrified, yes, but a core of resilience, of defiance, was hardening within her. What choice did Silas truly have? To hand over this child to a monster, to an unspeakable fate? Or to stand against an evil that threatened to consume everything pure in its path? What would you do, viewer, if faced with such a decision, knowing the cost could be your own life? The first major assault came under the cloak of pre-dawn darkness. Malachi's men, believing surprise was their ally, crept forward, shadows against shadows. But Silas was ready. He'd spent a lifetime reading the land, listening to its subtle whispers. He heard the shift of a loose stone, the caught breath of a man trying to be silent. The night exploded. Muzzle flashes lit the stark landscape. Bullets thudded into the thick log walls of the cabin. Silas returned fire with deadly accuracy, each shot aimed to disable, to deter. He fought with a cold, contained rage, the ghosts of his past battles rising to guide his hands. He was no longer just a reclusive rancher, he was a fortress, a bulwark against the encroaching darkness. Ilara, huddled near him, reloaded his spare rifle with trembling but steady hands. Her fear was still a palpable thing, but it was now alloyed with a fierce determination. She had seen true evil in Malachi's eyes, she saw a desperate goodness in Silas's. The initial attack faltered, repelled by Silas's grim defense. But Malachi was relentless. As the sun rose, painting the sky in hues of blood and fire, he ordered another charge, this time a full frontal assault. Men screamed, driven by fanaticism and fear of their leader. It was chaos. Silas moved like a wraith, from window to door, his shots finding their mark. But they were too many. One henchman managed to breach the doorway, his face a snarl of triumph. Before Silas could react, Ilara, with a cry that was part terror, part fury, swung a heavy iron skillet, connecting with the man's head with a sickening thud. He crumpled. Her eyes, wide and shocked at her own action, met Silas's. He gave a grim nod of approval. The tide was turning, but the cost was mounting. Ammunition dwindled. Exhaustion gnawed at him. Then, through the smoke and din, Malachi Thorn himself strode forward, seemingly untouched by the bullets that flew around him, a chilling figure of absolute self-belief. "It is over, Blackwood," he boomed, his voice carrying over the gunfire. "You cannot fight destiny. She is mine." He raised a pistol, aiming directly at Ilara. Silas roared, a primal sound of defiance, and charged. He crashed into Malachi, sending them both tumbling to the ground. It was brutal, raw. Fists flew. Malachi, though older, was strong, fueled by a mad righteousness. But Silas fought with the strength of a man who had nothing left to lose, and now, everything to protect. He saw not just Malachi, but every bully, every tyrant, every shadow that had ever threatened the innocent. With a final, desperate surge, he overpowered Thorn, the colt falling from the cult leader's grasp. Silas's own pistol was pressed to Malachi's temple. The remaining henchmen froze, their fervor broken by the sight of their fallen prophet. "It's over, Thorn," Silas rasped, his chest heaving. Silence descended, heavy and profound. The evil was broken. Days later, the dust settled. The authorities, alerted by a rider Silas had finally been able to dispatch, took Malachi and his dazed followers away. The story of the hidden cult and the lone rancher who defied them would ripple through the territory, a dark legend with a core of unexpected light. Silas Blackwood stood on his porch, watching the last of them disappear. Ilara stood beside him, no longer a dirty beggar girl, but a young woman who had stared into the abyss and survived. The trauma was still there, etched in her eyes, but so was a nascent strength, a quiet hope. She looked up at him. "What now?" she asked softly. Silas looked out at the vast, open land, no longer a symbol of his isolation, but of a future he hadn't dared to imagine. He put a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of awkward, profound comfort. "Now," he said, his voice still rough, but with a new warmth, "we rebuild the ranch. Once a refuge for his grief, would become a sanctuary for them both. A found family, forged in fire and fear, standing against the encroaching shadows of the world, a testament to the enduring power of courage and compassion." Silas Blackwood, the reluctant protector, had not only saved a life, but reclaimed his own. And in the heart of the wild, unforgiving West, a small flicker of redemption had ignited, promising a new dawn. If their story of courage against overwhelming darkness has moved you, please share your thoughts below, and remember to subscribe for more tales of resilience and hope. What acts of bravery have you witnessed that restored your faith in humanity?